David Goggins grew up in an abusive household, was overweight, struggled with a stutter, and faced racism throughout his childhood. By his early 20s, he was working as an exterminator, weighing close to 300 pounds with no clear direction in life. Today, he's a former Navy SEAL, an ultra-endurance athlete, and one of the most recognized voices in mental toughness. His book, Can't Hurt Me, isn't a traditional self-help book with neat theories. It's part memoir, part brutal life philosophy, built entirely from Goggins' own experience of transforming himself through extreme discipline and confronting pain head-on. Let's break down the core ideas and mental tools that define his approach. Idea 1. The accountability mirror. One of the most practical tools Goggins introduces is what he calls the accountability mirror. This is the practice of literally standing in front of a mirror and being brutally honest with yourself about your habits, excuses, and unmet goals, rather than avoiding self-reflection or making excuses to soften the truth. Goggins describes writing his goals and shortcomings on sticky notes and placing them directly on his mirror, forcing himself to confront them daily instead of quietly ignoring them. His point is that most people avoid honest self-assessment because it's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is exactly what triggers real change. You can't fix a problem you refuse to fully acknowledge. Idea 2. The 40% rule. This is arguably the most quoted idea from the book. Goggins argues that when your mind and body tell you you're completely exhausted and can't go any further, you've typically only tapped into about 40% of your actual capacity. He developed this idea through extreme physical challenges, ultra-marathons, endurance races, and brutal military training, where he repeatedly found that his mind gave up long before his body actually reached its true limit. The lesson isn't necessarily about physical endurance specifically. It's a broader claim that most people's internal sense of their own limits is dramatically understated, shaped by comfort and the brain's instinct to avoid unnecessary suffering. Idea 3. Callousing the mind. Goggins compares mental toughness to the way skin forms a callus after repeated friction. Just as your hands toughen up from consistent physical work, he argues your mind toughens up through repeated exposure to discomfort, difficulty, and controlled suffering. He deliberately sought out hard experiences, freezing cold water, punishing physical training, extreme sleep deprivation, not because he enjoyed suffering for its own sake, but because he understood that voluntarily confronting difficulty built a kind of psychological resilience that carries over into every other area of life. According to Goggins, people who avoid all discomfort in daily life remain mentally fragile, while those who deliberately seek out manageable challenges build a mind that can handle much larger ones when they eventually show up uninvited. Idea 4. The cookie jar method. During his most difficult physical challenges, Goggins developed a mental technique he calls the cookie jar. This involves mentally collecting your past achievements, moments where you overcame real adversity, and storing them like cookies in a jar. Then, in the middle of an incredibly difficult moment, whether it's a punishing workout or a personal crisis, he mentally reaches into that jar and pulls out a memory of a previous struggle he had already survived. The technique works because it replaces abstract self-doubt with concrete evidence from your own past. Idea 5. Taking souls. This somewhat unconventional phrase describes Goggins' approach to competition and self-motivation. Taking souls means using other people's doubt, complacency, or comfort as fuel for your own effort, essentially outworking everyone around you until your effort itself becomes demoralizing to those who aren't willing to match it. Goggins describes using this mentality during brutal training exercises, deliberately pushing harder specifically when others around him began to slow down or quit, using their exhaustion as motivation to dig even deeper himself. While the specific phrase is unique to his military and endurance background, the underlying principle is broader. Use the contrast between your effort and others' complacency as a source of internal motivation. Idea 6. The governing dynamic. Goggins uses this term to describe the specific formative experiences, often painful ones, that shape a person's core identity and internal narrative. For him, childhood abuse and repeated failure became the governing dynamic that initially defined his self-image as a victim.
His larger point is that everyone develops a governing dynamic from their early life experiences, but that dynamic isn't fixed. Goggins argues that through deliberate, sustained effort and confronting hard truths about yourself, you can consciously rewrite your own governing dynamic, shifting your internal identity from victim to someone who actively creates their own outcomes. Idea 7. The hard shell, soft core. Despite his relentless, almost brutal external discipline, Goggins is clear that this armor exists specifically to protect something vulnerable underneath. He describes building a hard shell of mental toughness and discipline, not to become emotionally numb, but to be able to endure hardship without being destroyed by it, while still maintaining genuine emotional depth and compassion underneath that resilience. This distinction matters because Goggins isn't advocating for suppressing emotion or ignoring pain entirely. He's arguing for building enough resilience that pain and hardship don't derail you, while still remaining a genuinely feeling, connected human being underneath that resilience. Idea 8. Embracing suffering as a tool. Throughout the book, Goggins reframes suffering not as something to be avoided at all costs, but as a tool for growth when approached deliberately and with purpose. He distinguishes between suffering that happens to you without any choice and suffering you voluntarily choose to confront in order to build strength and character. This is central to his broader philosophy. Comfort, in excess, doesn't build capability, it erodes it. Genuine growth, in his experience, almost always requires walking directly towards difficulty rather than around it, and doing so repeatedly until it no longer feels impossible. Idea 9. From victim to victor. Goggins is direct about acknowledging real, significant hardship in his early life, abuse, racism, and poverty that were entirely outside his control. But his central argument is that while you don't choose your starting circumstances, you do have significant control over how you respond to them moving forward. He rejects the idea that early trauma has to permanently define someone's identity or ceiling. Instead, he presents his own transformation as evidence that even an extremely difficult starting point can be consciously overcome through sustained effort, brutal honesty with yourself, and a refusal to use your past as a permanent excuse. Goggins' philosophy in Can't Hurt Me isn't gentle, and it isn't meant to be. His core message is that most people are capable of far more than they believe, and that the biggest obstacle standing between them and their potential is usually their own mind, not their actual circumstances.